Every single person who has ever achieved something remarkable, something that made others stop and stare, something that seemed almost effortless from the outside, shared one secret that almost nobody talks about. It was not discipline alone. It was not raw talent. It was not even passion, though passion certainly played its part. The secret was something far quieter, far more subtle, and far more powerful than any of those things. It was the ability to be still inside, even while the world outside was moving fast. It was the ability to act without strain, to think without force, to live without constantly fighting against themselves. And a woman named Payson Call wrote an entire book about exactly this, more than 100 years ago, and somehow in this loud, restless, overstimulated world we live in today, every single word she wrote feels more urgent, more necessary, and more alive than ever before. Payson Call was not a philosopher in the traditional sense. She was not sitting in an ivory tower writing theories that had nothing to do with real human experience. She was a woman who understood the body, who understood the nervous system, who understood what happens to a human being when they spend years, sometimes decades, holding themselves too tightly, trying too hard, pushing through when they should have paused, forcing when they should have flowed. She watched people, she worked with people, she saw what unnecessary tension was doing to men and women around her, and she sat down and wrote, with extraordinary clarity and warmth, a guide to something she called Power Through Repose. And that phrase itself, Power Through Repose, is worth sitting with for a moment before we go any further, because it sounds almost contradictory at first. Power, we have been taught, comes from effort. Power comes from pushing. Power comes from gripping the wheel tighter, from working harder, from refusing to stop, from squeezing every last drop out of every last hour. That is the story most of us have been told since we were children. Rest is a reward. Rest is something you earn. Rest is what happens after the work is done. But Call looked at this story and she said gently but firmly that we have it exactly backwards. That the most powerful people, the clearest thinkers, the most effective workers, the most truly alive human beings are not the ones who strain the hardest. They are the ones who have learned to do what they do without unnecessary resistance, without dragging their own weight against themselves, without turning every small task into a battle fought inside their own minds and bodies. This is the book, and this is the summary of it. But more than a summary, this is an invitation to actually feel what she was talking about, to let it land not just in your mind but somewhere deeper, somewhere that your body can recognize and respond to, because that is exactly what she intended. Let us begin where she begins, with the simple, startling observation that most people do not know how to use their bodies correctly. Not in the way we usually mean when we say that, not about posture or exercise or diet, but about something far more fundamental. Most people, she observed, use far more muscular effort than any given task actually requires. When they write a letter, they grip the pen as though they are afraid it might escape. When they walk across a room, they carry tension in muscles that have absolutely nothing to do with walking. When they talk to someone, they hold their face, their jaw, their neck, their shoulders, all slightly braced, all slightly contracted, as though they are perpetually bracing for some impact that never quite comes. And this excess tension, this habitual over-effort, drains energy constantly, quietly, invisibly, the way a slow leak drains a tire, until one day you notice that you are flat and you cannot quite explain how it happened. She called this phenomenon nervous tension, and she was careful to distinguish it from the natural, healthy tension that muscles need in order to function. Natural tension is purposeful. It rises when it is needed and releases when it is not. Nervous tension is something else entirely. It is the residue of worry, of hurry, of the relentless internal commentary that most of us run almost continuously, the voice that judges, plans, frets, anticipates, regrets, and generally refuses to be quiet. Nervous tension is what happens when the mind will not let the body rest, even for a moment, even when there is absolutely nothing that needs doing right now. And here is what makes this so important, so genuinely life-changing if you let it in. That constant, low-level tension does not just tire the body, it clouds the mind. It narrows perception. It makes problems feel larger than they are. It makes other people feel more threatening than they are. It makes the future feel more uncertain and frightening than it needs to. Nervous tension is not just a physical problem. It is the lens through which a tense person sees everything, and it is a lens that distorts almost everything it touches. Think about someone you know who is chronically tense. Not dramatically anxious, not in the middle of a crisis, just always slightly wound up, always slightly hurried, always slightly braced. Notice how they respond to small inconveniences. Notice how they interpret neutral comments. Notice how they move through a room. There is something exhausting about being near them, not because they are bad people, but because tension is contagious. The body reads the bodies around it, and a tense body in the room raises the ambient tension in the room. This is not metaphor, this is biology, and Call understood it, writing long before neuroscience had the language to explain what she was observing. Now think about someone you know who carries a quality of ease, not laziness, not passivity, not disengagement, but genuine ease, someone who seems unhurried even when they are busy, someone who listens with their whole attention, someone who moves through difficulty without falling apart. You probably do not have to think very hard to remember how it felt to be around that person. There was something almost restful about their company, something that made you feel, without quite knowing why, that things were probably going to be all right. That quality, that particular kind of presence, is exactly what Payson Call was pointing toward. That is the destination of everything she wrote. And the extraordinary thing, the thing that makes this book so hopeful, so genuinely useful, is that she was not describing some rare gift that only certain people are born with. She was describing a skill, a learnable, practicable, developable skill, the ability to release unnecessary tension, to move with efficiency rather than strain, to think with clarity rather than force, to feel deeply without being swept away, to rest genuinely and completely rather than just collapsing from exhaustion. These are all things she insisted that any person can learn, and she spent the rest of the book showing exactly how. She starts with the body because the body is where we live, whether we remember that or not. One of the great tragedies of modern life, she observed, is that most people have lost contact with their own physical experience. They live almost entirely in their heads, in the stream of thought and planning and worrying, while their bodies move through the world like vehicles being driven by someone who has forgotten they are driving. The body sends signals constantly. It tightens when something feels wrong. It softens when something feels right. It stores old fear in the shoulders and old grief in the chest and old anger in the jaw. But if you are never paying attention to it, if your awareness is always 3 steps ahead of you in some imagined future conversation or problem, you miss all of it. You miss the information, and you also miss the extraordinary pleasure of simply being in a body, of feeling the weight of your own limbs, the rhythm of your own breath, the simple, profound aliveness of existing in physical form. Call was not a mystic about this. She was practical. She suggested simple exercises, gentle and undramatic, for learning to notice and release physical tension. Lie down, she said, and one by one bring attention to each part of the body, not to do anything with it particularly, but simply to notice it, and then to let it be heavy, to let the weight drop fully into the surface beneath you rather than holding it up unnecessarily. This sounds almost absurdly simple. And yet, if you have ever actually tried it, really tried it with genuine attention, you know that it is surprisingly difficult. The habit of not quite fully letting go runs very deep. The moment you think you have released the tension in your shoulders, there it is again. The moment you think your jaw has unclenched, you notice it has tightened once more. The holding is so habitual, so automatic, that it takes real practice, patient and repeated practice, to begin to feel the difference between braced and released, between effortful and easy. But here is the thing she wanted people to understand. The effort required to learn this release is a very different kind of effort from the effort of straining harder. It is effort in the direction of letting go, which feels paradoxical, but which is absolutely real. You have to actively choose repeatedly to stop doing something rather than to do something new. And that choosing, that repeated, gentle, patient choosing, is itself a form of power. It is the power to interrupt a pattern. It is the power to respond rather than react. It is the power to be the one who decides how your own body is held, rather than letting unconscious habit make that decision for you moment after moment after moment. She moves from the body into the breath, and here she touches something that has been rediscovered over and over again in the centuries since she wrote, by meditation teachers, by therapists, by sports psychologists, by neuroscientists. The breath is the bridge. It is the one function of the body that is both automatic and voluntary, both outside conscious control and available to conscious influence. You do not have to remember to breathe in the way you have to remember to blink, but you can at any moment choose to breathe differently, more slowly, more deeply, more fully, and when you do, the whole system responds. The nervous system shifts, the heart rate changes, the muscles soften slightly, the mind quiets, even if only for a moment, even if only for a breath. Call did not offer elaborate breathing techniques or prescriptions. She simply pointed to the fact that most people, most of the time, breathe in a shallow, incomplete way, barely using the lower portion of the lungs, never quite exhaling fully, never allowing the body to experience the complete cycle of inhale and release. And she connected this directly to nervous tension. A person who is habitually tense is a person who is, among other things, habitually holding their breath slightly, or breathing in a way that reflects and reinforces their tension rather than relieving it. And so simply learning to breathe a little more fully, a little more completely, a little more freely is not a small thing. It is a retraining of the nervous system. It is a physical message sent from the voluntary part of the brain to the involuntary part that says, the emergency is over, we can let down now, it is safe to be here. There is a story worth telling here, not from Call's book directly, but one that illustrates exactly what she was pointing at. There was a concert pianist, a genuinely gifted one, who in his late 20s began to develop what musicians call focal dystonia, a condition where the fine motor control in the playing hand begins to break down, where fingers that should move independently start to curl together, where the very precision that years of practice had built begins to unravel. Doctors could find no clear neurological cause. The physical mechanism was intact, but the playing was deteriorating, and with it, his career, and with it, his sense of himself. He eventually found his way to a teacher who worked not with the music but with the body, with the way this pianist held himself at the keyboard, with the extraordinary tension he had built into his approach, the white-knuckle effort of someone who believed, deeply and completely, that mastery required force. The teacher showed him something that at first felt like regression, like giving up. She showed him how to play with less effort, not how to play more carefully or more technically, but how to play with a quality of physical ease that he had never once considered. How to let the weight of the arm do the work that the cramped fingers had been struggling to do alone. How to trust the music enough to stop fighting it. It took time. It was humbling. A man who had been considered one of the most technically accomplished pianists of his generation had to sit and play scales slowly, gently, attending not to the notes but to whether his wrist was free, whether his shoulder was dropped, whether he was gripping or resting. But something happened. Gradually, the tension released. Gradually, the fingers stopped fighting each other. Gradually, the music that came out of the piano became not just technically correct, but genuinely beautiful in a way that his earlier playing, for all its force and brilliance, had never quite managed to be. Because beauty in music, as in most things, comes not from the maximum application of effort, but from effort that has been refined to exactly what is needed, and nothing more. This is the heart of what Payson Call was teaching. Not less effort exactly, but right effort. Effort proportional to the task. Effort that flows rather than strains. Effort that leaves the channel clear rather than blocking itself with its own excess force. She spends considerable time in the book on the question of how we think, because the mind and the body, she insisted, are not separate systems running in parallel. They are one system, and what happens in one is reflected immediately in the other. A tense mind produces a tense body. A tense body produces a tense mind. And the cycle reinforces itself endlessly, as most of us know from direct, uncomfortable experience. The way that worry makes you physically uncomfortable, and physical discomfort makes you more prone to worry, until you cannot tell anymore which came first, or where one ends and the other begins. The mental equivalent of nervous tension, she wrote, is the habit of forcing thought. Most people, when they encounter a problem they cannot immediately solve, respond by thinking harder, by pushing their attention at the problem the way you might push against a stuck door, leaning into it with increasing force and frustration. And this approach, while understandable, while intuitively feeling like the right response to difficulty, is often precisely what prevents the solution from appearing. Because the mind, like the body, does not perform best under excessive force. It performs best when it is clear, when it is rested, when it is allowed to move freely rather than being shoved in a direction. She suggested something that would have seemed almost irresponsible to many of the industrious, hard-working people of her era, and that still makes many people slightly nervous when they first hear it. She suggested that when you are stuck on a problem, sometimes the most productive thing you can do is to stop trying to solve it, not to give up, not to abandon it, but to deliberately set it aside, to turn your attention elsewhere, to do something physical and simple and not mentally demanding. and to allow the mind to work on the problem below the surface, in the quiet, without being interfered with by the exhausting conscious effort to force a solution. We know, now, from neuroscience, that this is not just a pleasant idea, it is how the brain actually works. The default mode network, that network of regions in the brain that activates when we stop focusing intently on a task, is not a network of rest in the sense of inactivity. It is extraordinarily active. It is the network that makes connections, that integrates information, that allows the kind of associative, lateral thinking that produces genuine insight. When you are grinding away with focused, trained attention, you are suppressing this network. When you ease off, when you let your mind wander, when you go for a walk or wash the dishes or simply sit quietly, you are allowing it to do its extraordinary work. You are, in Call's language, resting the surface of the mind so that the deeper mind can move. She tells her readers, with warmth and without judgment, that the habit of mental forcing is almost always rooted in fear. The fear that if we stop pushing, nothing will get done. The fear that ease is the same as laziness. The fear that if we are not visibly straining, we are not really working. And she addresses this fear directly, not by dismissing it, but by asking people to look at the evidence of their own experience. When has forcing worked best for you? When have you produced your clearest thinking, your most creative solutions, your most genuine insight? Was it when you were grinding and straining and exhausted? Or was it when something released, when you somehow found a moment of ease, when the answer arrived not at the end of a long battle but quietly, unexpectedly, in a moment of relative stillness? Most people, when they sit with that question honestly, know the answer. The moments of real clarity are almost never the moments of maximum effort. They are the moments after the effort, or beside it, or in the spaces it leaves open, and Call is saying that you do not have to wait for those moments to happen by accident. You can cultivate the conditions that allow them. You can learn to move in and out of focused effort with more grace, to rest without guilt, to trust that the mind working freely and easily will accomplish more than the mind fighting itself in chains. She has a chapter on what she calls the will, and it is one of the most interesting parts of the book, because she is taking on something that her culture, like ours, held in almost sacred regard. The will, self-discipline, the determination to push through. These were the cardinal virtues of her era, the qualities most associated with success and moral worth. And she does not dismiss them. She is not arguing for indulgence or for giving in to every impulse. But she makes a distinction that cuts right to the heart of so much unnecessary human suffering. There is a difference, she says, between will that is aligned with nature and will that is fighting against it. Will that is aligned with nature is powerful and sustainable and produces genuine results. Will that is fighting against nature, will that is based in resistance, in compulsion, in the anxious need to overcome and control, that kind of will exhausts itself. It is the difference between swimming with the current and swimming against it. Both feel like effort. One moves you forward efficiently, one churns water. She was particularly interested in what happens when people use willpower to force themselves to rest, which sounds almost funny but is an experience many of us know. The person who lies down for a rest but cannot stop planning, who sits quietly but is mentally running through tomorrow's schedule, who takes a vacation but brings their anxiety with them so completely that the vacation feels more exhausting than work. This, she said, is the will turned against the body's needs, and it accomplishes nothing. Real rest, she insisted, requires a kind of consent, a genuine willingness to stop, not just a physical stopping while the mind races on. And developing that willingness, learning to actually put down what you are carrying rather than just pretending to put it down, is one of the most genuinely useful skills a human being can cultivate. She writes about sleep, and what she says about sleep is as relevant today as it has ever been, perhaps more so. Sleep, she observed, is not simply the absence of waking. It is a process, an active process, that the body and mind need to engage in fully in order to do their restorative work. And most people, she wrote, interfere with this process. They come to bed still wound up. They lie down carrying the day's unresolved tensions. They sleep perhaps in the technical sense of losing consciousness, but they do not rest, not deeply, not completely. And they wake feeling not refreshed but merely less tired, as though sleep was something that happened to them rather than something they fully participated in. Her advice about sleep was simple, and again, far ahead of its time. Do not bring the day to bed with you. Before lying down, consciously release the body, deliberately soften the held places, breathe slowly and fully, let the weight of everything you have been carrying settle down and rest. Not as a technique or a ritual to be performed correctly, but as a genuine act of surrender to the body's need. And if thoughts come as they will, do not fight them. Do not tell yourself you should not be thinking. Simply notice them, and then, gently, without drama, return to the weight of your body on the bed, the slowness of your breath, the darkness behind your eyes. Again and again if necessary, without frustration, without judgment, with the patient kindness you would offer to a child who was finding it hard to settle. There is something beautiful about the way she writes about this. She never sounds like she is lecturing. She sounds like she is sitting beside you, someone who understands from the inside what it is like to lie awake when you desperately need to sleep, someone who knows the particular misery of fighting your own mind in the dark. And she offers not a cure but a direction, a way of orienting that gradually, over time, teaches the system to rest more fully, to recover more completely, to meet the next day with more genuine energy rather than the blurry, depleted performance of someone running on empty. She turns, at some point in the book, to the question of other people, to the social dimension of tension and ease. Because we do not live alone, we live among other people, and other people are, as anyone who has spent significant time with them can attest, one of the primary sources of the nervous tension that Call is so concerned with. The difficult colleague, the demanding family member, the person whose energy seems to pull something tight in us the moment we enter the room they are in. Call does not pretend these people are not challenging. She does not offer platitudes about seeing the best in everyone or sending them loving thoughts. She is far too practical and honest for that. What she offers instead is something more useful. She points out that our reaction to difficult people is, at its core, a physiological event. When someone irritates us, or frightens us, or makes us feel unseen or dismissed or threatened, the body responds. The muscles tighten, the breath shallows, the jaw clamps down, the shoulders come up, and once the body is in that state, our perception changes. We hear what they say through the filter of our own tension, and we hear it less charitably than if we were relaxed. We respond from that contracted place, and our responses naturally tend to create more of what we least want. More conflict, more distance, more of the same dynamics playing out again and again, because we are bringing the same tense, reactive version of ourselves to each repetition. But here is what she noticed. It is very difficult to remain tense and reactive when you are physically relaxed. Not impossible, but much more difficult. The physiological state of genuine ease tends to produce, almost automatically, a different quality of perception and response. You hear the same words differently. You have more choice about how to reply. You can see something in the other person that you could not see when you were contracted, perhaps their own tension, their own fear, their own desperate need to be heard or understood, the things that make their difficult behavior comprehensible even if it remains unwelcome. This is not a technique for doormat behavior. It is not about suppressing your responses or pretending to feel what you do not feel. It is about coming to your relationships, particularly the difficult ones, with enough internal space that you can respond rather than simply react, that you can choose rather than being automatically triggered into the same old patterns. And that internal space, that genuine latitude of response, is exactly what physical and mental ease provides. She talks about hurry, and what she says about hurry is something that every person alive today needs to hear, because we live in a civilization that has essentially institutionalized hurry, that has made chronic busyness a status symbol and constant availability a professional virtue. Hurry, Call said plainly, is one of the most destructive forces in human life, not because speed is inherently bad, but because hurry, as she defined it, is not really about speed. Hurry is about doing things with more urgency than the task actually requires, with a constant background hum of not quite enough time, not quite keeping up, always slightly behind the pace you have set for yourself. And here is what hurry does, beyond the obvious exhaustion it produces. Hurry narrows attention. A person in a hurry cannot see what a person who is not in a hurry can see. They miss the detail that would have made the work better. They miss the person in front of them who needed something. They miss the moment of beauty that was available, the quality of light, the unexpected kindness, the small perfection of an ordinary thing, because they are already, in their minds, in the next moment, and the next, and the next, never quite here, never quite present to what is actually happening in the only place and time where anything is ever actually happening, which is here and now. She makes a distinction that is subtle but important, between moving quickly and being in a hurry. You can move quickly, you can be efficient, You can accomplish a great deal in a short time without being in a hurry. The person who is not in a hurry but moves with ease and intention can often accomplish more than the person who is in a constant anxious rush, because they do not make the same mistakes, do not miss the same details, do not have to redo the same work. They bring their whole attention to what they are doing, and whole attention is extraordinarily productive compared to the fractured, scattered attention of someone whose mind is already somewhere else. Think about the last time you felt genuine flow in your work. Not just getting things done, but that particular quality of engagement where time seems to move differently, where the work feels almost effortless, where you look up and are surprised by how much has been accomplished. That state, which the psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi would later famously describe and study, is exactly what Call was pointing toward. And it is, she insisted, far more available than most people believe. It is not a rare accident of inspiration. It is a state that can be cultivated through the same practice of releasing unnecessary tension, quieting the internal interference, bringing real attention to the present task that she prescribes for everything else. She has a section on what she calls the rest cure, which sounds more dramatic than it is. She is not talking about sanitariums or extended bed rest. She is talking about the practice of genuine, purposeful rest integrated into ordinary life. Not as a luxury or a reward, but as a necessity, as fundamental to effective living as food or water or sleep. And she is talking about the quality of that rest, not just its quantity. An hour of genuine physical and mental ease, she says, restores more than 3 hours of rest in a body that is still holding tension throughout. Her prescription is disarmingly simple. Lie down if you can. If you cannot lie down, sit in a chair and let the body fully settle into it, not perched forward, not holding yourself up, but genuinely letting the support of the chair take your weight. Then go through the body, not quickly, but with genuine attention, and let each part of it be heavy. Let the arms be heavy. Let the legs be heavy. Let the face, particularly the face, with its extraordinary density of small muscles and its tendency to hold expression even when no one is watching, let it soften. The forehead, the space between the eyebrows, the jaw, the tongue, the throat. And breathe. Just breathe, fully and slowly, without doing anything else with the breath, without counting or controlling, just letting it move. And if thoughts come, as they will, she says simply, let them pass. Do not follow them. Do not argue with them. Do not try to push them away. Just let them be there in the periphery, while you return again and again to the weight of the body and the movement of the breath. This is, of course, essentially what meditation teachers have been saying for thousands of years. Call arrived at it from a completely different direction, from her study of physiology and her observation of how human bodies actually work, and she arrived at exactly the same place. Around this point in the journey through her ideas, it feels important to pause and notice something. Everything she is describing, every practice, every principle, is pointing in the same direction. Toward presence, toward contact with what is actually happening, in the body, in the moment, in the relationship, in the work. The opposite of nervous tension is not laziness or vacancy. It is full, engaged, awake presence. And presence, it turns out, is not just more pleasant than the anxious, tense, hurried alternative. It is more effective. It is more creative. It is more connected. It is in every measurable way better. And yet it is the thing most of us sacrifice first and most completely when we are busy or stressed or afraid. She writes, with particular insight about the children, because she was a woman of her time who worked with families, and she saw what nervous tension in adults was doing to the children around them. Children are exquisitely sensitive to the emotional and physical atmosphere around them. They read the bodies of the adults in their lives with a precision that would astonish us if we could measure it. And a household running on chronic tension, even if no one is shouting, even if everything appears calm on the surface, communicates that tension to the children in it. They pick it up through the quality of touch, through the speed and rhythm of movement, through the tone of voice, through the thousand subtle signals that bodies broadcast continuously without any conscious intention. Call's argument is essentially that one of the most important things a parent or teacher can do for a child is to work on their own nervous system. Not to be perfect, not to never feel stressed or anxious or overwhelmed, because all of those things are part of human life, and children need to see that too. But to develop enough self-awareness and enough practice with release that the chronic background tension does not become the air the children breathe. Because children learn, more than anything, by absorption. They learn how to be in the world by being with the people who are already in the world, and they will absorb whatever quality of being those people carry, whether that quality is ease or strain, presence or distraction, trust or fear. This is one of the most sobering and also one of the most hopeful things in the book. Sobering because it places genuine responsibility on adults to do their own inner work, not just for themselves, but for the children around them. Hopeful because it means that every step you take toward your own genuine ease, every practice you develop, every habit of release you cultivate, radiates outward. It changes the quality of the air around you. It affects the people you live and work with. It contributes, in ways both small and large, to a slightly different quality of human experience in every room you walk into. She returns, near the end of the book, to a theme that has been present throughout but that she now addresses directly. The theme of self-knowledge, because everything she is prescribing, all the practice, all the attention, all the patient, repeated work of noticing and releasing and returning, presupposes a willingness to know yourself, to actually pay attention to your own patterns, to notice what tightens you and what releases you, to be honest about where you hold tension and why, to stop running from your own experience and start, gently and curiously, turning toward it. This is not as frightening as it sounds, or rather, it is a little frightening, because most of us have learned, very thoroughly, to avoid paying too much attention to ourselves, to keep moving, keep busy, keep distracted, rather than sit quietly with our own inner weather. But Call is not asking for dramatic self-examination. She is not suggesting that you dig into your past or analyze your psyche or do anything particularly uncomfortable. She is simply suggesting that you start to notice, that you start to feel what is happening in the body from moment to moment, that you start to catch the moments of unnecessary tension and make the choice, however small, to release them. That is all. And from that simple beginning, everything else becomes possible. She ends with something that might be her most radical claim, though she makes it quietly, without fanfare. She says that the path she has been describing is not ultimately about performance or productivity, though it will improve both. It is not ultimately about health, though it will improve that too. It is about something more fundamental. It is about the quality of life itself, about what it actually feels like to be alive in a human body on this particular planet, in these particular years, with these particular people around you. Because a life lived in chronic tension is, whatever its external achievements, a life in which a great deal of the actual experience is missed, the beauty that is available, the connection that is available, the simple, profound pleasure of being here, of being awake, of being a creature with a body and senses and the capacity to be moved by things. All of that is available, always, right at the surface, and most of us walk past it every day too tense, too hurried, too lost in our own internal noise to notice. This is the gift she is offering, not a technique, not a self-improvement project, not another thing to add to the list of things you should be doing and probably are not. She is offering a direction, a way of orienting that, over time, with practice, with patience, with the particular kind of gentle and sustained attention that she herself modeled in the writing of this book, leads toward a life that is more fully inhabited, more genuinely lived, more completely yours. There is another story that belongs here, one that illustrates the long arc of this kind of change. There was a woman who spent the first 40 years of her life doing everything correctly, by the standards of her world and time. She worked hard, she kept the house, she showed up, she performed, she pushed through. She prided herself on never stopping, never complaining, never letting her exhaustion show. And then one day, not dramatically, not in a crisis exactly, but in a quiet, ordinary moment, she sat down at the kitchen table in the middle of the afternoon and found that she could not get up. Not because anything was physically wrong, but because something, some essential thread of willingness, had simply run out. She had pushed past it so many times, so thoroughly, that it was gone. Her recovery, which is the word she used for it, took a long time. And what she recovered was not the ability to do more, to perform better, to push harder. What she recovered was herself, the capacity to feel what she felt, the ability to rest without guilt, the willingness to move at her own pace rather than at the pace that had always been demanded or expected. She learned, in her 40s, things that Payson Call was trying to teach at the turn of the last century, things about the body, the breath, the gentle, patient work of release. And she said later that she wished someone had put this book in her hands when she was 25. Not because it would have saved her from difficulty, because difficulty is part of living, but because it might have helped her live inside the difficulty differently, with more grace, with more ease, with less of the unnecessary suffering that comes from fighting yourself while you fight everything else. That is the promise, and it is a real one. Not that life will become easier, not that the challenges will diminish or that the world will become less demanding. It will not. But the relationship you have with yourself, the quality of presence you bring to your own life, the degree to which you are actually here for what is happening, all of that can change. It changes slowly and non-linearly, with setbacks and plateaus and the occasional frustrating return to old patterns. But it changes, and the direction of that change, the direction that Payson Call pointed toward with such clarity and warmth in a book written more than 100 years ago, is toward something that does not have a perfect word in English, though rest comes close. Power comes close. Ease comes close. Presence comes close. Maybe the best word is wholeness. The sense of being entirely where you are, entirely who you are, not divided against yourself, not running from yourself, not performing a version of yourself for the benefit of the watching world, but simply, genuinely, completely here. Moving when movement is called for, resting when rest is called for, thinking when thinking is needed, and releasing thought when it is not, feeling what is there to be felt without being destroyed by it, acting with the energy that the task actually requires and none that it does not. This is power through repose. This is what she meant, and it is still, after all this time, one of the most useful, most human, most genuinely hopeful ideas that anyone has ever thought to write down and share. Near the 10-minute mark of sitting with these ideas, something usually begins to happen, if you have been truly listening and not just processing. Something in the body begins to respond. The shoulders drop slightly, the breath deepens slightly. Some small, held thing starts to consider tentatively the possibility of release. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, exactly the beginning she was describing. Every great change begins with exactly that, a moment of recognition, a tiny opening, a breath that goes just a little deeper than the one before it. If you have felt even a trace of that while listening, something has already begun. And if you practice it, if you return to it, if you are patient and consistent and kind with yourself along the way, it will grow. The way a river grows, not from force but from persistence, finding the path of least resistance, wearing away the resistance gradually, until what seemed like an obstacle becomes simply part of the landscape that the river moves around and through with ease. Payson Call gave us a map. What we do with it is up to each of us. But she believed, and everything she wrote breathes this belief, that every person carries within them the capacity for this kind of ease. Not as an achievement to be reached at the end of a long struggle, but as a quality already present, already available, simply waiting for the unnecessary resistance to be laid down so that it can be felt. That is the whole book. That is the whole beautiful, practical, human, extraordinarily relevant book. And if there is one thing to carry away from it, one thread to hold on to through the busy and demanding, and sometimes overwhelming ordinary days of an ordinary life, let it be this. You do not have to earn the right to rest. You do not have to be finished to be at ease. You do not have to fight yourself in order to move forward. The power you are looking for is not on the other side of more strain. It is available right now, in this breath, in this body, in this moment, exactly as it is. You only have to learn, slowly and gently and without judgment, to stop holding it away from yourself. If this summary has meant something to you, if something in it has shifted even slightly, if you found yourself breathing a little differently somewhere in the middle of it, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to Audiobook Library, because it truly does help this channel grow, and it means that more people can find these ideas, the kinds of ideas that do not just inform you but actually change something in the way you carry yourself through the world. Every like, every subscription, is a small vote for the kind of content that treats you as a full human being, with a body and a nervous system and a genuine need for something more than just information. And this channel is here to provide exactly that. There are many more books like this one waiting in our video library, books that look at how human beings actually work, how we can live with more ease and depth and genuine engagement, how we can find our way back to ourselves, even in the middle of lives that sometimes seem designed to pull us away. Please do explore the other videos on this channel. There is something there for wherever you are right now, whatever kind of rest, or clarity, or direction you happen to be looking for. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening all the way through.